Welcome, dear listener, to tonight's quiet journey, a story woven from the ancient mists of time. As you settle into rest, allow your breathing to slow, your body to soften, and your mind to gently drift across the ages. Tonight, we travel far beyond the present moment, far beyond the cities, the bright lights, and the familiar. We venture into the tranquil rhythms of the ancient world, into the rolling, emerald hills of what would one day become the British Isles. Picture them now, soft and endless, blanketed in low, creeping mists that cling to the earth like a protective shroud. These lands are quiet, untouched, and alive with the gentle hum of nature's heartbeat. The air is fresh here, rich with the scent of moss, oak, and distant wood smoke. Listen, if you will, to the faint rustling of the tall grasses, swaying in a breeze that carries with it the whispers of forgotten tongues. Somewhere, the distant trickle of a stream winds patiently over smooth stones, its soft murmur steady and comforting. Tonight, you will walk slowly and gently alongside a figure whose life is deeply attuned to the rhythms of the earthy Celtic Druid, a keeper of sacred knowledge, a tender of nature's balance, and a quiet observer of the turning seasons. Their life is not one of grand battles or clamorous cities. It is a life of listening to the trees, to the stars, to the subtle language of plants and stones. It is a life shaped by the rituals of the sun and moon, by the sacred groves where no axe may fall, and by the simple, steady passage of days guided by the cycles of the natural world. Tonight, we will follow this druid through the calm flow of an ordinary day. A day of careful observation, of slow wandering, of gathering herbs and listening to the stories carried by the wind. You will walk with them beneath the towering oaks, feeling the soft press of moss beneath your feet, and hear the rhythmic beat of a wooden staff upon the forest path. There will be quiet moments by the fire, gentle chants sung in the company of the morning mist, and the peaceful preparation of healing remedies drawn from the earth itself. There will be no rush here, no great urgency. Only the steady pace of a life fully present in each moment. Perhaps, as you listen, you will find that your own breathing has begun to match the slow pulse of this ancient world. Perhaps you will feel the comforting weight of centuries slipping away, replaced by the soft embrace of moss, bark, and the endless sky above. Let your mind wander freely as the story unfolds. You may follow closely, or you may drift in and out like the morning fog. It is perfectly all right. The story is here to accompany you, to soothe you, and to gently guide you toward rest. And so, with the soft earth beneath our feet and the quiet sky above, let us begin our walk into the sacred groves where the life of a Celtic druid patiently awaits. Let us begin. The soft gray light of dawn crept over the dense forests of ancient Gaul, painting the moss-covered trees and low-lying mists in shades of silver. Birds began their gentle chorus as a cool breeze stirred the dew-laden leaves. In a small clearing, hidden by towering oaks and a protective ring of hawthorn, a Celtic druid named Eoric stirred from his slumber. Eoric lived in harmony with the forest, his simple shelter woven from willow branches thatched with fern and red, blending so seamlessly with its surroundings that no outsider could easily find it. The heartbeat of the earth, the rhythm of the trees, and the song of the river all pulsed through his life. Today, like all others, he rose not with the jangle of time, but with the breath of the earth itself. His long woolen cloak, embroidered with swirling patterns of green and gold, trailed softly over the damp ground as he stepped barefoot into the clearing. Eoric began his day with the morning salutation to the four sacred directions, facing east, where the first fingers of sunlight pierced the mist. He raised his hands in silent greeting to the rising sun, the symbol of renewal and clarity. He whispered an ancient invocation in the tongue of his ancestors, words passed down by druids before him. O great spirit of the east, bringer of light, I welcome your wisdom into my heart. Turning to the south, he welcomed the fire of life, the spark of courage. To the west, he offered his gratitude to the waters that nourished the land and soul. And to the north, he bowed to the enduring stone and steadfast earth. After this sacred greeting, Eorik walked the quiet path to the sacred spring, his feet memorizing every twist and root along the way. The path was lined with bluebells and the curling ferns of early summer, their presence a sign that the forest spirits were at peace. The spring, known as the Whispering Well, was a place of ancient power. Its waters bubbled softly, the surface glinting as though sprinkled with tiny stars. As Eorik knelt by the spring, cupping the cool water in his hands and drinking deeply, feeling the vital energy seep into his bones. He rinsed his face and hands, a ritual of purification to begin the day unburdened by yesterday's thoughts. Nearby, he gathered a bundle of fresh sage, sweetgrass, and mistletoe, sacred plants whose properties he knew intimately. The mistletoe, carefully harvested from the highest branches of the sacred oak, was a symbol of life and protection. Each herb had its place in the rituals that shaped his days. Returning to his grove, Eorik carefully kindled the morning fire in the center of his stone circle. Using flint and dried birch bark, he murmured words of awakening as the flames flickered to life, sending a thin column of fragrant smoke spiraling toward the canopy above. Into the fire, he laid the sage and sweet grass, watching the tendrils of smoke curl and dance. He seated himself upon a smooth, flat stone near the fire, pulling from his satchel a small wooden bowl carved with intricate knots and spirals. Inside were dried juniper berries, elderflowers, and bits of sacred yew bark, which he began to grind with a stone pestle, releasing their subtle aromas into the morning air. The creation of herbal tinctures and medicines was both a science and a sacred act. As he ground the herbs, he whispered blessings into the mixture, calling upon the spirits of the plants to share their healing virtues. His breath slowed, each movement deliberate and reverent. Once the mixture was ready, he set it aside to steep, knowing it would later be given to a sick villager whose name had come to him in last night's dream. The Druids believed in such visions where the spirit world whispered its guidance between sleep and waking. The gentle rustle of the trees overhead was joined by the faint sound of hoofbeats along the distant path. Eorik turned his gaze toward the sound, unhurried, for few dared to approach a druid uninvited. Yet he sensed no threat. A young man, breathless and travel-worn, entered the clearing. His tunic was damp with morning dew, and his expression carried both urgency and reverence. "Eorik," the young man said, bowing his head respectfully. "My sister, she has fallen ill. None in the village can ease her suffering. My mother begged me to find you." Eorik studied him for a long moment, his weathered face serene, his gray-green eyes thoughtful. "Kay, the paths are rarely crossed by chance," he said softly. "You have come at the right time." He gestured for the young man to sit by the fire, offering him a warm broth brewed from nettles and wild garlic. As the visitor drank, Eorik prepared a healing bundle, carefully selecting herbs from his collection: the fever-reducing meadowsweet, a soothing elderflower, and a touch of ground mistletoe for protection. "You will take these to her," Eorik instructed gently. "But you must also tell her to listen to the trees. She must rest where the wind can touch her skin, where the morning birds can sing to her heart." "Okay." The young man nodded, absorbing the weight of the words. Before sending him on his way, Eorik offered a protective blessing, tracing ancient sigils in the air with his fingertips. "Travel well. The spirits will walk with you." As the young man departed, Eorik remained by the fire, his thoughts turning inward. He felt the pulse of the earth, the steady rhythm beneath his feet. He understood that his life was one of quiet service, of tending to the balance between the seen and unseen. His morning continued with more rituals, visiting the sacred oak to leave offerings of honey and oats, catering dew from the wildflowers for later distillations, and meditating beneath the canopy where sunlight dripped like gold through the leaves. Each act was a thread in the woven tapestry of his day. No moment was hurried, no task insignificant. His hands worked in rhythm with the land, his heart attuned to the subtle shifts in the breeze and the calls of the woodland creatures. By midday, Eoric felt the quiet satisfaction of a morning well tended. He had walked his sacred paths, offered his gratitude, and aided those in need. And yet, he knew that the day was still unfolding, that the forest held further stories, and that the listening would continue long into the golden hours. With his staff in hand and the faintest smile upon his lips, Eoric stepped once more onto the mossy trail, the morning mists parting gently before him, welcoming him deeper into the heart of the ancient woods. The morning dawned with a soft golden light as Aidan, the Celtic Druid, stepped from his modest roundhouse, its thatched roof damp with the dew of early spring. The crisp air carried the sweet, clean scent of wet grass and the faintest hint of wild mint. His breath rose in steady clouds, visible in the morning chill as he gathered his satchel, his wooden staff, and a small bundle of ceremonial herbs he had prepared the night before. Today would not be like other days. Aidan had long known the rhythms of his life, tending to the grove, healing the sick, teaching the young, and quietly listening to the movements of the stars and the breathing of the earth. But this day carried the weight of something different, subtle call he had felt in his bones before the sun had risen. A whisper that belonged not to man, but to the land itself. With a slow, measured step, he began his journey toward the sacred grove, a place untouched by the hands of those who would shape the world to their will. Here, the trees were ancient, their trunks broad and strong, their canopies a delicate lattice that caught the morning light like stained glass, clung to their roots like green velvet, and the air grew warmer, thicker with the fragrance of damp earth and blossoming hawthorn. The soft thump of his staff against the packed earth was a steady heartbeat as he walked. Birds called overhead, their songs weaving into the quiet tapestry of the morning. A fox darted across his path, its red fur glowing briefly in a shaft of sunlight before vanishing into the underbrush. Aidan paused by a cluster of bluebells, their tiny blossoms nodding gently in the breeze. He knelt, brushing his fingers lightly over the petals, and murmured a quiet chant of thanks. To a druid, each plant was a bearer of life, each stone a keeper of stories. There was no rush in these rituals, no impatience in his hands. The world moved slowly here, and so did he. Further along, he stopped by the elder tree, its gnarled limbs outstretched like the arms of an old friend. Aidan placed his palm against its bark, feeling the faint pulse within. The elder was a guardian of the grove, a witness 2 generations. He whispered a quiet greeting, listening in return, his heart attuned to the subtle languages of the living world. The sacred grove soon revealed itself, its entrance marked by 2 standing stones, their surfaces carved with spirals and interlocking knot symbols, older than memory. Their meanings known not through words, but through the soft understanding that blossomed in the spaces between silence. Aidan crossed into the grove, the air growing hushed, as if the earth itself paused to listen. Sunlight filtered through the oaks and yews in thick, golden beams, illuminating patches of soft grass where wildflowers bloomed in small, shy clusters. This was a place of gathering, of ceremony, where the natural and the divine met in quiet union. From his satchel, Aidan drew a small pouch of seeds and scattered them in a wide arc, a gift to the soil. He lit a bundle of dried sage and lavender, the smoke curling upwards in slow spirals. As he circled the grove, he murmured blessings in the old tongue, his voice low and steady, blending with the rustling leaves and the distant rush of a stream. The rite complete, he seated himself upon a low stone, worn smooth by centuries of use. His thoughts settled into the deep quiet, his breathing aligning with the pulse of the grove. In this space, Time seemed to stretch and soften. He was not young nor old. Here he simply was. His mind turned to his lessons, those passed down from his teacher and from the elders before him. The cycles of the moon, the turning of the seasons, the sacred alignments of stones that told stories older than villages. But more than anything, he recalled the importance of listening. To walk the path of the Druid was to observe, to move with the flow of life rather than against it. A soft rustling drew his attention. From the trees emerged Brenna, a fellow Druid and one of his closest companions. Her braided hair was adorned with small wildflowers, and her calm presence brought a smile to Aidan's face. "The land spoke to you this morning as well?" she asked, settling beside him. "It did," Aidan replied. "Something stirs, a change, subtle but certain." Brenna nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I felt it too. It's as if the old paths are awakening." Together they shared a simple meal of oatcakes and sweet berries gathered from the edge of the forest. Their conversation flowed in the gentle way of old friends, touching on the rhythms of the village, the flowering herbs and the shifting winds that hinted at coming rains. As midday approached, they rose to tend to their duties. Aidan followed the winding path to the nearby village, where a young mother awaited his help. Her child had fallen ill, the fever clinging stubbornly despite her careful care. The villagers respected the Druids, though they often regarded them with a mix of reverence and distance, unsure of the depth of their knowledge and the ancient powers they served. Aidan greeted the mother with quiet kindness and examined the child with practiced hands. He listened to the soft rattle in the boy's breathing, felt the heat upon his brow, and sensed the strain in the boy's small body. From his satchel, Aidan prepared a soothing remedy, tea of meadowsweet and elderflower to ease the fever, a poultice of lavender and plantain leaves to calm the body. As he worked, he whispered gentle blessings, his words flowing like the cool stream that ran near the grove. The mother watched with wide, trusting eyes as Aidan guided her through the preparation of the herbs. His voice was soft, his instructions clear, and his presence a balm in itself. The child's breathing soon eased, his restlessness quieted by the careful touch of nature's medicines. Aidan remained until the boy slept soundly, then rose to leave, offering the mother a reassuring nod. "Continue the teas," he said. "Let the child rest beneath the morning sun." She thanked him with tearful gratitude, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped his own. As he departed, Aidan felt the familiar warmth of purpose fill him. To serve as a bridge between the wild and the village, between the sacred and the ordinary, this was his path. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as he returned to the forest, his staff tapping softly against the stone and earth. He paused to collect herbs along the way, his keen eyes spotting the tiny violet flowers of selfule tucked among the grasses, the pale blooms of chamomile nodding in the breeze. At the edge of a quiet brook, Aidan sat once more, his hands busy weaving a small talisman from oak leaves and braided reeds, a token of protection for the child. The gentle rush of the water and the rustling leaves formed a comforting symphony around him. As the day waned, he found his way back to the sacred grove where Brenna awaited. Together, they performed a quiet evening ritual, offering gratitude for the guidance of the land and the wisdom of their ancestors. The fire burned low as twilight settled, the sky painted in soft lavender and rose. The air grew cool, fragrant with the lingering scent of herbs and wood smoke. Brenna spoke softly. "The old stories tell us that the groves remember our steps, that each time we walk these paths with care, we become part of the memory of the land." Aidan nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Then let our steps be gentle." The evening deepened into night, the stars emerging one by one, their pale light reflecting in the quiet pool at the grove's center. Aidan lay upon the soft moss, his breathing steady, his heart at peace. The sacred grove, the ancient trees, the slow songs of the earth, all of it wrapped around him like a warm blanket. His thoughts wandered to the child, to the woman in the village, to the seasons yet to turn. And as his eyes drifted closed, he felt the comforting certainty that tomorrow he would rise again to walk these same paths, to tend these same stories, to listen and to serve. For to be a druid was not to seek greatness or glory. It was to live in quiet devotion to the land, to the unseen threads that wove life together. And in this quiet, sacred work, Adan found his truest peace. Sleep settled over the grove as the world exhaled, and the listening trees kept their steady watch through the night. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the dense canopy of ancient oaks as Brannock and his fellow druids prepared for their journey to the sacred groves. The dew still clung to the grass, and the crisp air was alive with the scent of pine and wild thyme. Birds flitted between branches, their songs a gentle accompaniment to the druids' quiet preparations. This was not an ordinary day. It was a day of deep significance, one that marked the turning of the season. The ritual of the stones was to be performed, a ceremony that had been held for generations beyond memory. It was a rite that bound the people to the land and the cycles of the earth. Brannock had attended the ritual as a boy, standing at the edge of the circle, watching in silent awe as the druids communed with the rhythms of the world. Today, he would stand within the circle as an equal. The druids set out at a steady pace, their white robes brushing against tall grasses and low shrubs as they moved through the forest. The journey to the sacred grove was not long, but it was made with deliberate care, each step placed in reverence for the ground they walked upon. Along the way, Brannock touched the trunks of the great oaks, whispered brief blessings to the small woodland creatures they encountered, and paused to note the ripening berries and the blossoming heatherage, a sign of the season's shift. When they reached the grove, a hush seemed to fall over the world. The space was a wide, natural clearing encircled by towering yews, their dark, ancient limbs arching overhead like silent sentinels. In the center of the grove stood the great stone circle, each monolith weathered by centuries of wind and rain, yet firm and steady as though rooted in the very bones of the earth. Brannock and his companions moved to their places around the stones, each druid standing before a particular marker, each with its own history and resonance. Brannock approached the stone of his lineage, its surface carved with faint spirals and knotwork that had been chiseled by hands long departed. The high druid, a venerable figure named Melon, raised his staff, the wood darkened and polished smooth by decades of use. He began the invocation, his voice steady and low, rising in the ancient tongue that resonated through the grove like the rumble of distant thunder. "We gather," Melon intoned, "as the sun marks the wheel's great turning. As the rivers flow and the seeds awaken, so to do, we move in harmony with the pulse of the earth." The druids joined their voices in response, their words weaving together in layers of sound, a gentle chant that filled the grove with a sacred rhythm. Brannock felt the vibration of the stones beneath his palms, a quiet thrum that seemed to echo the beat of his own heart. Melon continued, leading the rite through its carefully remembered steps, the offerings of grains and honey, the lighting of the sacred fire from flint and tinder, the blessing of the water drawn from the spring that fed the grove. Brannock took his turn, stepping forward to present a garland of wildflowers gathered that morning, their fragrance sweet and grounding. As the ritual progressed, Melon called upon the spirits of the land, the guardians of forest and river, the unseen keepers of the winds and stones. The air thickened with a sense of presence, subtle yet unmistakable, as though the grove itself listened. At the height of the ceremony, the druids joined hands and circled the central stone 3 times, their chant rising in volume until it seemed to fill not just the grove, but the air, the sky, the very earth. Brannock felt a deep connection, as though the circle extended far beyond the visibly vast network of stone circles, sacred groves, and ancient paths that threaded through the entire land. When the chant reached its crescendo, Melon lowered his staff, and silence descended like a soft cloak. The druids stood motionless, breathing in the stillness, their hearts attuned to the rhythms they had summoned. In that moment, Brennick glimpsed something profound, not a vision, but a deep understanding. The ritual of the stones was not merely a tradition, it was a living dialogue with the land, a reciprocal bond that held the fragile balance between people and nature. To forget this bond, to sever it, would be to drift untethered in a world that no longer knew them. As the ritual drew to a close, the druids placed their hands upon the stones one final time, murmuring their gratitude and farewells. They extinguished the sacred fire, leaving the grove as they had found it, untouched, save for the lingering energy of their presence. The return journey was quiet, each druid walking in contemplative silence, their thoughts full of the ritual's weight. Brennick felt both humbled and fortified, carrying with him the knowledge that he was now a part of the circle that spanned centuries. Back at the village, life resumed its gentle rhythm. The people tended their fields, mended their homes, and gathered for meals beneath the open sky. Yet Brennick moved through his tasks with a new awareness. The herbs he collected, the trees he passed, the stones that lined the footpaths off were part of the great conversation he now understood he had always been a part of. He took special care to tend the sacred groves near the village, visiting them often to ensure they remained undisturbed. When travelers passed through, he welcomed them warmly, but with a watchful eye, always mindful of the delicate balance he now helped to uphold. The seasons turned, and with each passing year, Brennick's road deepened. He guided younger druids through the paths he had once walked, teaching them the sacred songs, the healing properties of plants, and the rituals that honored the cycles of life and death. In time, he found himself standing where Melon had once stood, leading the ritual of the stones with steady hands and a voice that now carried the weight of his own years. The sacred circle remained, weathered but enduring, a silent witness to the generations that came and went. And so, the journey continued, not as a destination, but as a rhythm. A constant weaving of past and present, a living bond with the earth that pulsed beneath their feet. The story of Brennick, the druid who once listened quietly at the edge of the grove, had become part of the stones, part of the wind, part of the gentle turning of the world. Several seasons had passed since Brennick led the ritual of the stones, his days folding into a comfortable rhythm of tending the sacred groves, teaching his young apprentices, and listening to the murmured stories of the wind as it passed through the ancient trees. Yet one quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with the colors of ripened plums and burning embers, a messenger arrived from beyond the distant hills. The messenger was a fellow druid, her name Aleth, with travel-worn boots and a braid streaked with gray. Her voice was steady, but bore the weight of urgency. She spoke of a great gathering to be held on the western coast, where the elders from distant tribes and far-flung groves would come together, a conclave of stones not held for many generations. The message was clear. Brennick's presence was requested. The journey would take many days, passing through dense forests, wind-swept moors, and valleys carved by ancient rivers. Brennick packed his satchel with care, bringing not only his herbs and a simple stone blade, but also the seeds given to him by the elders, entrusted to him to plant when the time was right. Aleth and Brennick traveled together, their footsteps carrying them beyond the familiar meadows of his home. Along the way, they encountered stone circles left untended, their markings worn thin by time. Brennick would pause at each, laying his hands upon the cool surfaces, whispering quiet blessings, and feeling the faint echo of rituals long forgotten. The stones remembered, even if the people did not. As they moved westward, the land shifted. The oaks and ash gave way to pine forests that sang softly in the sea breeze. The sky grew wider, the scent of salt and wet sand mingling with the wildflowers that clung stubbornly to the cliffs. One evening, they reached a place known as the Valley of Whispers, where the wind wove through jagged stone formations and carried voices from distant times. It was said that here, if one listened with patience, they could hear the echoes of those who had walked the land long before. Brennick sat in the valley for many hours, his breathing slow, his senses open. The voices he heard were not loud, but gentle, threading through the stones like the softest of sighs. They spoke of cycles, of balance, of the importance of remembering. He carried their words quietly as they continued their journey. The days grew longer as they approached the coast. They passed through villages that had nearly forgotten the old ways, where few could still name the sacred herbs or recognize the chants once sung to the river gods. Yet, even in these places, Brennock found traces of the enduring rhythm, a sprig of elderflower tucked above a doorway, or a child weaving garlands from clover and bluebells without knowing why. At last, they arrived at the gathering place, great stone circle perched on the edge of the sea, where the waves sang endlessly against the cliffs. The druids had already begun to assemble, their white robes bright against the gray stones, their staffs weathered and etched with the marks of their journeys. Brennock was welcomed with quiet nods and clasped hands. Among the gathering were faces both familiar and new, each carrying the weight of their own lands and stories. They camped in small groups, sharing herbs, meals, and fragments of their travels. Over the days that followed, the conclave met in the circle, the chants of many voices rising together in harmonious waves. They spoke of the shifting patterns of the stars, of the tides that no longer followed the familiar pool of forests where the trees had fallen silent. There was concern, but there was also resolve. Brennock listened, and when his turn came, he spoke of the valleys and groves he tended, of the sacred stones still whispering their wisdom, and of the younger druids he was guiding. He shared the old stories and the new, weaving them together with the care of one who understood their fragile importance. It became clear that the wisdom of the stones, their patience, their memory, their quiet endurance was needed now more than ever. The druids agreed that their paths must cross more often, that the knowledge should not drift into the silence of unvisited places. Brennock and Aleth walked the coastline together after the conclave, their feet sinking into damp sand as the tide pulled gently at the shore. They spoke of what lay ahead, of seeds yet to plant, of sacred groves that might still flourish, and of the need to listen, always, to the land's unspoken words. Before parting, they exchanged simple tokens, carved stone from Brennick, a woven cord from Leith, reminders that though their paths would soon diverge, they were still bound by the same rhythm. Brennick's return journey was solitary, but filled with new resolve. The stones along the paths welcomed him, their silence rich with meaning. He tended the groves with greater devotion, taught the children their names in the old tongue, and ensured that the sacred fires continued to burn. As the seasons turned once more, Brennock stood again in his village's stone circle, his hands pressed firmly against the ancient surface. He no longer wondered whether the stones remembered. He knew they did, and he knew too that through his quiet tending, his careful teaching, and his endless listening, this bond between his people and the land would endure as a relic of the past, put as a living, breathing rhythm that would carry them into the future. The story of Brennock, now etched in the memory of the stones, was not an ending, but a continuation of the great song of the earth, still playing softly for those who choose to hear it. The sea breeze lingered in Brennick's cloak long after he left the coastal stone circle behind. His feet retraced familiar paths, yet they felt subtly altered, as though the ground itself recognized him now as one who had stood among the greater conclave. The journey home was quieter, his only companion the rhythmic pulse of the land beneath his boots. When he finally crested the familiar hill overlooking his grove, the sight was as it had always been, the standing stones catching the evening sun, the small stream curving like a silver thread, the gentle sway of ancient oaks. And yet, Brennock felt the weight of what he carried, the stories, the seeds, the silent promises made beneath foreign skies. His apprentices greeted him with warm smiles and eager hands, but he could sense their curiosity. They had known the local cycles, the patterns of their valley, but now he brought whispers of distant places and voices. They gathered around him beneath the sheltering branches of the oldest oak, listening as he unfolded the tale of the conclave, of the druids from beyond the mountains, and of the changes stirring across the land. Yet Brannock did not speak only of distant gatherings. He reminded them of the rhythms beneath their feet, the stones that remembered, the herbs that still grew faithfully by the stream. His voice, calm and deliberate, wove distant horizons and familiar soil into one seamless fabric. Over the following days, he led them on quiet walks through the grove, pointing out the subtle shifts in the leaves, the whispers in the water, the gentle sighs in the wind. His teachings became deeper, less about recitation and more about listening. His apprentices learned to feel the heartbeat of the earth, to honor the patience of the stones. One crisp morning, Brannock planted the sacred seeds given to him by the elder druid at the conclave. He chose a clearing where the sun lingered longest, pressing each seed carefully into the earth with a whispered blessing. His apprentices knelt beside him, their hands steady, their breaths slow. "These will grow slowly," Brannock said softly. "Perhaps none of us will see their full bloom, but that is not the point." The apprentices understood. Some teachings stretched beyond a single lifetime. As seasons passed, the grove thrived under Brannock's steady guidance. He visited the stones more often, leaving offerings of wildflowers and honey. Sitting quietly with his palm against the cool surfaces, listening to their wordless songs. There were still festivals to lead, rituals to tend, herbs to gather. Life's rhythm continued, steady and soothing, but Brannock now carried with him a deeper awareness of tether, connecting his small grove to the wider world. 2 other stone circles, other quiet keepers of the ancient ways. The grove remained a place of peace, but within its silence, the stories of distant hills, salt stones, and wind-carved valleys now lived, gently folded into the song of the earth. The dawn broke pale and soft, a gentle light filtering through the frost-coated branches of the ancient forest. Winter's grasp had begun to loosen, yet the chill still lingered in the air, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and awakening life. In the heart of the grove, Brannock prepared for the rite of renewal. It's a sacred ceremony marking the turning of the year, a time when the old gave way to the new, and the land was reborn in vibrant promise. The ceremony was not merely a ritual. It was a living bridge between the realms of earth and sky, between the seen and unseen. It demanded of Brannock not just knowledge and skill, but a deep, listening heart, attuned to the subtle language of the world. As the first flickers of dawn painted the sky, the apprentices gathered, their breath visible in the cold air, eyes bright with anticipation. Together, they arranged the sacred circle, a ring of standing stones carved with runes and symbols passed down through countless generations. At its center lay the ancient fire pit, cold now, but ready to burst into life. Brannock's fingers brushed over the carved markings, feeling the faint vibration of their power beneath his skin. He called out to the wind, to the earth, to the ancestors whose spirits still danced invisibly among the trees. His voice was steady and clear, weaving prayers of gratitude and hope into the morning air. One by one, the apprentices brought offerings, bundles of dried herbs, freshly cut branches, stones smoothed by rivers, and wildflowers picked with reverence. Each item was placed carefully within the circle, each a thread in a tapestry of renewal. The air was charged with a quiet energy, as if the forest itself held its breath. When the sun finally breached the horizon, casting golden light upon the stones, Brannock struck flint against steel. Sparks flew, catching on kindling until the fire flared, a living heart beating at the grove's center. The flames danced, casting shifting shadows on the faces around the circle. Brannock began to chant the ancient verses, his voice rising and falling like the rhythm of the earth's own breath. The apprentices joined, their youthful voices mingling with his in a chorus that echoed beyond the trees. As the fire grew, so did this sense of connection between the druids, the land, and the unseen guardians who watched from the shadows. The sacred grove was alive, pulsing with memory and promise. After the chants, Brennick guided the group through a silent meditation, encouraging them to open their senses, to feel the whisper of the wind, the pulse of the earth beneath their feet, the warmth of the fire against their skin. He spoke of the importance of presence, of listening without judgment, of allowing the land to teach in its own time. The ceremony lasted long into the day, each moment deepening the bond between the people and their home. As the sun arced high, a messenger arrived from a nearby village, bringing troubling news. A piece of the grove and its surrounding lands was threatened not only by men with axes, but also by a sickness creeping through the forest of blight that withered leaves, blackened bark, and silenced the songs of birds. Brennick's heart clenched. The balance he had fought to protect was fragile, vulnerable to forces beyond even his understanding. Without hesitation, he organized a small party to investigate, including his most trusted apprentices. Carrying with them remedies, sacred tools, and a quiet determination. Their journey took them deeper into the woods than Brennick had ever ventured, beyond the familiar paths and into the realm where shadow and light mingled in mysterious ways. The trees grew taller and closer, their branches knitting a dense canopy that filtered the sunlight into shards of emerald and gold. Here, the blight was unmistakable. Leaves hung limp and spotted, the air heavy with a sickly, sweet odor. The ground was littered with fallen branches and the remnants of once vibrant plants. Even the birds were silent, save for the occasional distant call of a crow. Brennick knelt beside a withered sapling, touching its bark gently, squeezed his eyes, and reached out with his senses, seeking the root of the sickness. His mind opened like a flower. In visions come images of disrupted waters, of poisoned streams that fed the roots of dark shapes moving beneath the soil. The blight was not natural. It was a wound inflicted upon the land. Determined to heal what he could, Brennick set to work. He gathered herbs known for their purifying properties, cleansing willow bark, protective yarrow, and the rare silver leaf, whose leaves shimmered with a faint inner light. With his apprentices, he brewed potions and poultices, carefully applying them to the trees and soil. But the deeper they ventured, the more signs of the blight they found. It was spreading faster than they could tend. That night, as they camped beneath the great boughs, Brennick sought guidance through a vigil. He sat by a fire, eyes closed, and entered a trance-like state. The forest around him grew still, the usual sounds fading into silence. In the quiet, a presence emerged, ancient and vast, like the earth itself, speaking through a voice of stone and root. The spirit revealed that the blight was the result of a broken pact, a betrayal of the sacred balance between humans and nature. Long ago, an ancient grove had been cut down, its stones shattered and scattered. The land's heart had been wounded, and the sickness was a reminder, a call to remember the old ways before the damage became irreversible. Brennick awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. Healing the blight would require more than herbs and rites. It would require mending the bond between people and the land, rekindling respect and reverence that had been lost. The following days were filled with hard work and quiet resolve. The druids planted new saplings in cleared spaces, sang blessings over the soil, and reached out to the villages, teaching the old songs and stories anew. They encouraged the people to honor the earth, not as a resource to be taken, but as a living, breathing entity to be cherished. Slowly, signs of healing began to emerge. New leaves unfurled bright and green, the birds returned to sing, and the forest breathed easier. Yet Brennick knew the journey was far from over. The rite of renewal was not just a moment in time, It was a reminder that the dance of life and death, growth and decay, required constant care and attention. As the season turned toward spring's full bloom, Brannock stood beneath the newly sprouted canopy, feeling the pulse of life stronger than before. His heart was heavy with the weight of his responsibility, yet filled with hope. The whispering woods around him were alive with stories of loss, healing, and enduring connection. And Brannock, the druid of the ancient ways, was determined to be their steadfast guardian. The following weeks passed in a blur of motion and reflection. Each day began before the sun touched the horizon and ended long after it had slipped beneath the western hills. Brannock and his apprentices became guardians and healers, walking the line between labor and reverence. The forest, once shadowed and silent, began to respond. The blight retreated before the steady work of healing hands and the rekindling of ancient rites. But more than the physical restoration, something deeper stirred in the land of rekindling of spirit. One morning, Brannock awoke to a strange stillness. The air was crisp and clear, yet no birdsong stirred the branches. Curious, he rose and stepped outside the shelter of their camp. The forest lay before him, bathed in the soft light of dawn, but something was different. The leaves glistened with an unearthly sheen, as though kissed by frost, though the air was warm, but the mist hung lower, swirling with a slow and deliberate rhythm. From within the depths of the woods, a soft murmur arose, a voice both ancient and gentle, like a song woven from the earth itself. Brannock moved toward it, guided by a sense older than memory. After a long walk, he arrived at a glade he had not seen before, though he knew the forest well. In its center stood a massive oak, its trunk twisted and gnarled with age. The bark shimmered faintly in the morning light, and at its base, roots stretched outward like open arms. The murmur grew clearer. Brannock knelt and laid a hand upon the bark. The voice spoke to him, not in words, but in feelings, waves of sorrow and hope, warnings and promises. The tree was a spirit, an ancient guardian of the woodland, awakened by the rites and the healing. It told him that the land was fragile, yet resilient, that the balance depended on respect, care, and the willingness to listen, not just with ears, but with heart and soul. Brannock spent hours in that glade, communing silently with the spirit. When he finally rose, he felt a new clarity. The work ahead was vast, but not without guidance. Returning to camp, he shared his experience with the apprentices, urging them to deepen their connection with the land. Together, they created new rituals, simple acts of gratitude, offerings to the trees, songs to honor the cycles of growth and decay. News of their efforts spread to nearby villages. People began to come, not only seeking cures, but also to learn how to live more gently upon the earth. Brannock welcomed them, sharing his knowledge freely, reminding all that they were part of a greater whole. One evening, under a sky heavy with stars, Brannock sat beside the fire, reflecting on the journey. The path of the druid was not easy, nor was it ever truly finished. It was a commitment to a way of being one of harmony, respect, and enduring care. As the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth, Brannock felt a quiet joy. The forest breathed with him, and he with it. The rite of renewal had not only restored the grove, but had rekindled a sacred promise, one that would echo through seasons yet to come. And so, the druid's tale continued, a story woven with the threads of earth, spirit, and the eternal dance of life.